Hello, everybody, and welcome to this fireside chat with myself, Daniel Laws. I'm the Chief Executive of YouthPolitics UK, and it's my delight to be joined today by Leon Cook, the Chief Executive of Atticus Communications. Thank you so much, Leon, for being with us today.
Thank you, Daniel. Great to be here.
Fantastic. Leon, would you just like to say a bit about your job and your role?
Sure. So I started Atticus Communications at the back end of last year, the end of October. The genesis of my career, I've interned in Washington, I've worked in The Hague, I've done bits and bobs in the Middle East and in Brussels. I worked for the big three global agencies, the largest independent. And when you've done all of that and worked an even split of 50% in-house and 50% agency side, you feel like after 20 years, yes, I'm that old, in your career, you've probably seen enough and you want to give it a go and try and advise clients from what you've learned. And so today, I've set up, we're an agency of 5 at the moment, which is pretty good growth for, 10 months of getting underway. But I guess one of the things you want to probably ask me is some of the things that I've seen change over the last 20 years in public affairs specifically.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for that. We will be talking today about the future of public affairs. So there's a lot, especially recently with COVID and such a changing landscape to talk about. First of all, I suppose the main question is, have you seen throughout your time a changing role in how you've done your job, in what public affairs is dealing with? Has it gone from a more traditional lobbying sort of task to something more to do with strategic communications? Have you noticed any difference there?
You just answered the question yourself for me, really. So yeah, so if you think about 20 years ago, certainly 30 years ago, public affairs as a concept, as a word, didn't really exist. Lobbying would, but then people didn't really understand what that was. I say most of my family still don't know what I do, but I think that if you look at job specs on LinkedIn these days, the amount of times public affairs is now cited and mentioned. So people that have a job title of head of external affairs or government affairs or communications or stakeholder relations or whatever it may be, public affairs is an important part of that. And that the consciousness around how policy, politics, regulation, all other things stem from that. So how you run your business, your license to operate, whether it be planning, communications, stakeholder relations, it all basically comes from the same place, which is what are the laws of the day and what are the government doing that's going to impact my business, my community, my stakeholder group, my interests. And so I think there is a much broader understanding of its importance, and also the way that it operates. When I first started, it was absolutely about lunch, right? So you go to lunch, take the right people, all about your black book and your network. And that is still as true today to a certain extent as it is in any business or industry. But transparency, lobbying registered, the impact of social media, it has completely revolutionized and changed the way that we operate and think. And that anyone now is a stakeholder. God forbid you say anything out of turn, it will be picked up and you will be held to account. So as a result of that, I think that people are much more careful about what they do. They have much more robust plans in place, whether it be crisis communications or messaging around what they want to achieve, which is great for people like me or for my industry, because there is a real need and a value add to having people who have seen that and experienced that in the room. And that's one of the things we try and help clients with is, think not only about your target group, but all the other pinpoints that sit around that have a view on what it is that you're doing.
It was really interesting there that you mentioned social media and the impact that that's had on changing that landscape and moving those goalposts. What would you say? There's a lot that's been written about whether or not public affairs has capitalized on these technical innovations. Where can you see technology guiding public affairs over the next few years, and will it?
Well, it is, again, so go back 20 years, the amount of polling companies that existed in the United Kingdom. You had Ipsos Mori or Gallup and one or two others. Now, lots of public affairs agencies themselves have an in-house capability that do polling. So as you begin an exercise, whether it be branding or a general bog standard lobbying campaign. Who is it that I'm trying to achieve? What does the data say about this issue? What is public opinion and sentiment around this issue? Everything that we do now is driven by data. If you want to sell in a press release, you need to do that with stats, because that is what catches the eye, not just gut check opinion. And so it will continue to be ever more so the way in which campaigning and branding and outreach is built around. So I think that you're going to, and people of your age, you're a little bit younger than me, you are much more savvy and grow up in and around an IT environment early through your school years, and how you use social media to build a coalition. And it's only going to get bigger and probably better.
That's really interesting. So we've mentioned their technological skills. What sort of skills would you recommend young people then equipping themselves with in order to access the world of public affairs later on as a potential career?
Well, another thing that's changed also just in the last 6 months as a result of the pandemic is that previously, if you thought about, say you had a bog standard contact program that you wanted to achieve in the House of Lords or Westminster or the House of Commons, that meant you literally trying to secure and going to attend a meeting in Portcullis House. We don't do that now because time is cute, and on top of that, as a result of social distancing, I'm talking to you through Zoom right now. I've done in the last 2 weeks a number of ministerial client calls through Zoom, and I think that will continue. One, because it's just much easier to do. There is an element of you lose a little bit of in the room, that ability to connect, look in the whites of someone's eyes, so to speak, and connect with them, but you need to be able to do that. So what does that mean? Your argument needs to be sharper. You're probably only got half an hour. You're not going to sit there and have a coffee and all the rest of it. You need to be able to very quickly create a rapport with someone, explain in very simple layman terms what it is that you want to achieve and why it is in their best interest. And that always sat at the foundations of what public affairs is and that capability. But I think that automation and the online world and environment just speeds everything up, and it makes it much more an important skill set that people need to have.
So if we're looking at potentially graduates this year who are seeking to go into public affairs, or those coming up in the next few years, what would your main advice be then? You've mentioned there potentially jobs with MPs, sort of skills, or anything else you think that they should really know before entering?
Well, most people that want to enter into public affairs normally do so with a view to they have a general interest in politics, or there is a particular campaign or theme or something, an interest that is generally sparking their motivation, and then they understand that to do that they need to engage the third sector, or they need the support of their local MP, or they genuinely want wholesale change, whether it be climate change, Extinction Rebellion, whatever the movement, that all gravitates basically from one place. I say that the climate change debate is a really good example of something that was always in the public consciousness and also in the consciousness of legislators, but it is public opinion and the media that has galvanized and moved it on to the next level. So what do people need to do? So one thing that I would, if you want to get a foothold in this industry, that could be anything from joining your local association, getting involved, literally canvassing, knocking on doors, delivering leaflets. People, hate to give up their weekends, but that is how you meet people and understand what is generally being spoken about and are issues of interest on the doorstep. Definitely going to work for your MP. There is no better training you'll ever get, whether it be for a year, 18 months, to however long, even just an internship for that matter, sitting or working inside Westminster, understanding how bills are made, seeing the sheer volume of stuff that comes, anywhere between 400 or 500 emails a day into a backbench MP, let alone a PPS or a minister. So it's all about being able to triage, understanding what's important, again, honing your message, because what is going to pique their interest. But there are so many now spin-offs that allow people to get into public affairs compared with 20 years ago, whether it be agency side, in-house corporate, trade association, pressure group, um, digital campaigning. Again, I mean, this has all come from, what did you learn or what have you seen? 20 years ago, there were a handful of public affairs lobbying companies. If you think about it now, there are so many. I mean, the UK is a very deep bench of competition. I would say closely creeping on what you see on stateside in Washington. But there's also a lot more specialization and niche. So if you are a IT guru and that is your thing, then there are companies that you can basically grow your understanding of public affairs, but within a digitalization specialty, or financial services, or healthcare, or whatever it may be. So there is much more. There's much more on offer now for you to get going. But the political element, whether it be voluntary work or charity work or helping with your local school, all of that good stuff, and it's really, I've seen this I've tracked this a little bit as well. If I think about all the people that maybe interned at one of the agencies that I worked at when they were either still at university or a fresh grad, and where they are now 5-10 years later, some of them are risen the ranks within the party, or they're a senior public affairs manager on the corporate side, or even a head of. So that it just gives you that extra boost if you've actually worked on the legislative side of this entire industry. So don't just go and work for an agency. See how the other half are living.
Fantastic. There's loads of opportunities there for young people to get involved. So have you noticed any particular benefits of them bringing on sort of younger employees to Atticus Communications?
Well, I think there's a moral responsibility to do that anyway. So I think about, the people that afforded me an opportunity, and diversity and inclusion is incredibly important now. We live in a very multicultural society, and just because you're potentially a little bit older doesn't mean your ideas are necessarily better. And I think that ideation and the ideas factory, within Atticus, for example, we're a very flat organization. I want the body of opinion and ideas to come from absolutely everyone. And I think that is generally what you would see across the industry now. And that's not just a UK thing, that's just, wherever it may be, in Europe, in the Middle East, and stateside as well. So I think that there is a moral obligation certainly on the agency side of the aisle to promote that. And moreover, it just makes you look like a much more rounded organization. People want to see that you're giving opportunities to young people, and they are, more often than not, they're very closer to a stakeholder group that I potentially cannot necessarily resonate with. Look at this old man River, what does he know? So someone that is experiencing what they're experiencing or has recently done so, that's a good thing.
And very quickly, it's going to be quite hard to avoid this part of the conversation, the impact of COVID on public affairs. Do you think it's had a significant impact? Do you think it's changed the trajectory of the direction that public affairs was going? What do you think it's done?
Yes, in the lean times, and we're in an economic downturn, so there is a knock-on impact to new business development, because people are saving people's jobs. They are, livelihoods are on the line here, and therefore campaigns that would be seen to be a nice to have as opposed to a requisite, that just gets kicked into the long grass. So there will be some natural attrition as a result of this, I would imagine, over the course of the next 6 months, or from the start of the pandemic when lockdown ensued. So in March, it'd be very interesting to see just the number of agencies, for example, that are still there. I think that the way, again, that we operate, as I said, virtually, remotely, if you think about I know for a fact that a number of my competitors are either downsizing or thinking about how they use their office space. So, the real estate environment is and will be impacted by this, but it's basically about how you transition and revitalize your workspace, bring people back into offices, because they are and continue to be a place for ideation, collaboration, and I think a work ethic and culture of a business is intrinsically linked to that. But yeah, so if competition is going up in the space, but the level of business or opportunities is necessarily decreasing, it's just going to make it that much more competitive. But that, in some ways, is also, I wouldn't say helpful, that would be disingenuous, but it just means you've got to be sharper, keener, more ambitious, and think more creatively about how you win business, keep clients, and continue to offer legitimate solutions to people's problems.
That's really interesting to hear. And I suppose as a final question, Leon, if you were able to go back in time and provide yourself with some advice to prepare you for the world of public affairs, maybe you can touch on there a bit about why you as an individual chose public affairs. What would you tell yourself?
Study a little bit harder, probably. Spend a little bit less time at the bar. I think that I am more engaged with politics now as someone that is now near to, or I'm in my middle years, than I've ever been. But if I had that probably earlier in my career, I think it would have given me a little bit more of a direction of where I wanted. I've bounced around a little bit. I've worked in Europe and the Middle East and all over the place. But if you have a clear idea about what it is that you want to achieve, I think that is helpful in any discipline or industry. As I say, the broad depth of experience. Definitely, my advice to everyone is to go and work in another market, go and work in another country. I learned a language on the back of it. I can hardly speak to anyone in Dutch because I don't come into contact with them too often, but it gives you just a different take on how business is done and how governments run, or how their legislatures policy make, and so I think that's very helpful. But always be open to ideas, never say no, and just work very hard. So all of the things that I maybe should have done just a little bit more, going back there.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Leon. It's been an absolute pleasure. This will be hopefully accessible on our YouTube channel, YouthPolitics, but also be on Atticus's social media as well. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Darren.